One. All right, Justin, welcome to the Nova University podcast. Would you like to introduce yourself to the people that are listening in and the people on the panel?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. My name's Justin Tahilramani. I am a real estate investor. Also, recently transitioned to the Army Reserve from active duty, and currently living in Florida. Still pretty active in the real estate investing, specifically in the greater Fayetteville market. Kind of welcome back. I've done a little bit of a lot of things, so we can dive into it a little bit more and kind of see where the conversation goes. But I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me, and yeah, I look forward to the conversation.
All right, no problem. And can you tell the people how you, so in the beginning when you were a kid, did you always have a investing mindset, or like what got you, like what were you doing as a kid to get you forward to where you are now?
Yeah, so I would say I was more or less brought up around it. I mean, my parents, they were into real estate. I would say probably more so accidentally, because over time they moved a couple times, and we lived in Southern California, and each time they would keep the house and rent it out and just move to a new house. So they weren't, I mean, they had W-2 jobs. They were, real estate was not their primary goal, but I mean, I just remember as a kid, my dad used to always manage his own rentals, and he would take me out to do repairs on the properties, and over the summer we'd paint houses and fix fences, and so it was I was just kind of brought up around it. So I think when I kind of grew up and was had a job and the opportunity to invest in something, real estate just came more naturally than say the stock market or bonds or other types of investments. It just made a little bit more sense to me.
Okay, okay. And what did your parents do while you were they were doing all this? Were they like uh in their W-2s? Did they retire early? Like what were they like?
No, they were, I mean, they were local government employees. They worked for the local county, you know up until the time that they retired. So real estate for them was just something that they did on the side, and it was manageable because I mean, I think at growing up, I think the most they had was maybe two properties or something. But fortunately for them, they lived in the right place at the right time. I mean, being in Southern California, and just over time, the natural appreciation of home values and rents. And so they were very fortunate, but they were also worked very hard, and they worked a long time to be able to get there. So
Yeah,
now fortunately they're able to kind of enjoy life.
yeah. And when you were 18, uh, what what was your decision then? Because a lot of people, that's when they start their life, right? They're like, oh shit, uh, I'm an adult now, technically. Uh,
Yeah.
so you joined the military after 13, after 18, correct?
Yeah. So initially, after high school, I went to community college for a year and kind of quickly realized that like just wasn't really the right environment for me. I really wanted to go to a 4-year college and kind of get the traditional college experience. So I did a year in community college and then moved to Texas and enrolled in Texas Tech, and that's where I did join the National Guard, did ROTC, and finished up my college there. And then after college, graduated and commissioned in the Army.
Nice. And your time in the army, well, how would you just best describe it for those that either they're kind of uh, deciding whether to go to college, whether to go to the military? What's your opinion on both?
I mean, the military has changed a lot. In the 13 years that I was active duty, I mean, I certainly saw it change quite a bit. I mean, I would say that I would do it all over again. They were really great experiences that I had while I was in the military, and there was some really challenging and really difficult times that I had. And I think it certainly shaped me into who I am today, and it allowed me the ability to grow up into an adult and have responsibility in life early on.
Mhm.
So I think just like anything else, it's what you make of it. I think a lot of people can be successful in the military, but the military is not for everyone. So um, I think it's a really personal decision. But the best thing that in my opinion, that somebody can do is do the research up front. Seek out people that have done what you're trying to do, and position yourself in a way that you're not going in with no knowledge.
Yeah.
Um, but I think another thing to understand is I think that there's this perception that people go in the military and a lot of people they're going in there because they're getting a second chance. They were somehow challenged in life, and this is an opportunity for them to turn things around. But the reality is that the military is very much a zero defect organization. I mean, if you go in there, I mean, you really have to be prepared to um, you know, fall in line and, stay out of trouble. And, there's just not a lot, early on in your career, you can't afford to make mistakes. And I think a lot of times, young guys, young girls are not, maybe at that point in their life, at the age of 18, if they're going to make it a career. Um, so I think going into it, you need to have the end in sight, basically. If you're only going in there for 4 years and that's your goal, okay, great. If you're trying to make it a 20-year career, like you got to start with the end in mind and have a goal, have goals along the way, and have mentors, that take take you and kind of leads you on the path to success.
Hmm. And with that, why'd you choose to go National Guard versus active duty?
It was because I knew that I wanted to, I knew that college was something that I wanted to do, and the National Guard just allowed me to kind of kickstart my career earlier than I would have otherwise been able to. And there were definitely, financial benefits as far as, education benefits and the GI Bill and all that. So I wasn't a scholarship cadet, so I didn't go to, ROTC on a scholarship. So that was, in my opinion, the next best opportunity for me.
Okay, okay. And I'm guessing your first duty station was in Fayetteville, or you were National Guard. So how'd you get to Fayetteville?
So yeah, so my first duty station was Fort Lewis. That's where I met my wife. She's also an active duty officer. So we met in Washington. That's where more or less the real estate investing started. We each already had primary residences when we met. Ended up moving into her house after we got married. We rented out my house, and then along the way, before we had PCS, we had picked up a foreclosure that we had rehabbed and rented out. And then from there went to Fort Bragg. So by the time we were in Fort Bragg, we had, 3 properties in Washington that were rentals. And so that's kind of where it started. We're no longer in Washington at all. We've sold all those properties, but that's kind of where it all began.
Okay. And what's your advice for those that are like when you first started to do real estate and you're renting out your primary, you got your you got your foreclosure property, you fixed it up. Uh, did you start networking at that point, or or like, hey, I got to do this on my own at this point?
Yeah, I think growing up and, through the early part of my adult life, like I was not a natural networker. I didn't understand the importance of networking. And um, I'd always heard it, when you watch other people, podcasts and interviews, and people talk about the importance of networking and growing a network and having people, that you can rely on. And that just didn't come naturally to me. And I think I felt very uncomfortable doing that and talking about real estate because I mean, I feel like today real estate is very you know, glamorized, if you will. I mean, this was before all the flipping shows on TV. It was before, real estate investing was, really mainstream. So I almost felt like I was kind of the weirdo that, went to work, worked a full-time job. And then at night, went to this property and, worked on it until 11 or 12 at night. And then, it's before we had kids, obviously. And then got up, the next day to go to work. So I felt like I was the weird one, so no, I wasn't good at that. And I think that certainly held me back because had I been a little bit better at that, I think I would have, gone farther faster, but, everything worked out and, I think the way it was supposed to. And I've certainly learned that, over time, just the power in, being able to talk to people, being able to develop relationships and sustain relationships over time. So
I like that. It kind of reminds me of like when you were saying in the day you're at your W-2 and at night you're doing your real estate. It's like Batman where you're Bruce Wayne during the day and then you're Batman at night. I like that analogy where you put in. Uh, and what would you say for those that are trying to do real estate but they have no money at all? They're like, Justin, how you make all your money? Do you save up? Do you save up like 100,000? Like, what'd you do to do all this stuff?
Yeah, I mean, certainly there are avenues that you can take to break into different elements of real estate without having money. We know whether that be wholesaling, partnering. But I can't specifically talk to those because that wasn't my experience. My experience was like, I had a W-2 job. My wife was working. We didn't have kids. We had the opportunity to be able to save up, money for down payments, and just do traditional, 30-year mortgages on our investment properties. Um, but it was challenging when we started because, I mean, you're talking about, 2010, 2011, 2012. I mean, all the banks are still, heavily impacted by the financial crisis, and getting access to lending was incredibly challenging. Even with W-2 jobs, because after one or two are fine, but you start getting into 3 and 4 and more, and it was difficult, especially at that time. Banks were really rigid on when you're trying to buy foreclosures, and they didn't have, like, maybe it didn't have carpeting, or it didn't have a stove, or something overall, not, it's not really that big of a deal, but the bank's not going to let you go in there and touch the property before you own it, and the financing company is not going to finance it unless it has those things. And even though I'm sure back then things like hard money and all that existed, because real estate wasn't so mainstream, I mean, I didn't know about that stuff. It just wasn't something that I was educated about. Um, so yeah, that was another challenge. But yeah, that's how I did it. I mean, that's how I got started, and I think over time that's evolved a little bit. But I think the less money that you have going into it, the more sweat equity and time and hours that you're going to have to put into making it work. But it's certainly possible. There's a lot of people that have done it.
Mhm.
So I wouldn't say that that's something that should dissuade you from, getting started. Even if that means that, hey, you don't have money and you have more time than money, maybe is the way I should put it. Find somebody that's doing it. Ask them if you can, you know, help them. Provide labor, like, be a fly on the wall and kind of learn the process, because that is probably one of the most important things, is just being able to get reps in and understand how things work. And um, so yeah, I mean, sometimes you can pay for an education with money, or you can pay for an education with time and work. So
Yeah. And with how did you learn starting out? Did you read the books or did you listen to the podcast? Like what'd you do?
no, I mean, again, fortunately, for me growing up, I had a fundamental understanding of real estate at a very basic level. So I didn't feel ever like I was getting into something that was outside of my comfort zone, from a perspective of, okay, I understand the process. I understand, the amount of work that's going to be involved. Because initially we would always buy like light rehabs, like paint, carpet. We didn't get into anything that required like, big structural changes, or fixes or anything like that. So I kept it to an area that I felt comfortable with. And I mean, but there was still some level of uncertainty, about just getting involved, with something like that, and whether or not it would be, you know successful. When you're starting something, you don't know, like, am I going to be able to get renters? Will it rent? How long will it stay vacant? There's a lot of unknowns. But I think for me, I started out slowly, one project at a time, and as I gained confidence, I began to kind of take on larger projects and more risk, and new types of real estate investing.
Nice. What's the biggest I guess how would you say, not discouragement, but biggest problem or that you face in real estate?
Um, uh, I mean, when you say problem, what do you? I guess.
Like it was too much for you to handle, but you overcame it.
Um, I mean, I would say that the times that I've been the most uncomfortable in a real estate transaction is when I've ventured into a new space that I don't have the same level of knowledge about. For example, buying vacant land, or doing a design build, where I'm working with the home builder to build a new property. Things like that, where there's just, at a basic level, how things it kind of should work in your head, but you've never done it before. So there's a lot of, there's a lot more risk. So, but I would say that there's one story where, I got, I feel like, sold something that, where all the information wasn't provided to me up front. North Carolina does property auctions through the Department of Transportation when they do eminent domain and they buy properties. And if there's residual parcels that they didn't use after a project, they will auction those off. And so there was an auction. There was a 1 acre lot, like right, down the road from where I had done a lot of investing and knew the area really well. And I guess it's on me. Like I didn't maybe follow the steps that I would have normally followed because it was being sold through the state and it was a transaction that didn't involve an attorney because it was just going to be a quick claim deed. I had a lot of faith, in it being a government organization, that there wasn't going to be anything, out of the ordinary. So closed on the transaction. It was through an auction house. So, I did all that, got the title, everything. And then about 3 months later, I found out that there's when the Department of Transportation does projects like that, if a parcel is within a certain distance to like an on ramp or an off ramp, there's limitations of access that they record, and it's not readily available. It's not like it's on a deed or anything like that that you would see. You'd probably have to do a full on title search where an attorney goes back and looks at all of those things. Well, it had road frontage, but the entire road frontage was under a restriction of access. So that basically, for all intents and purposes, it was landlocked. So you couldn't, if you wanted to develop it, you wouldn't have access to your property. And so all this came out after the fact, and I actually called the local representative, and he was like, "Look, I've seen this happen like one other time, and like I think it's really screwed up because that they know that, obviously they know that there's no access, but they don't actually tell you that information." So I thought I was going to get stuck with like a $15,000 parcel that, I just would never really be able to use because I'm not going to sell it to somebody else knowing that. And at this point, like, I mean, I've been doing real estate for years and years. So, I mean, it wasn't like I didn't know what I was doing. And I was just thinking in my head, like, man, like, what if somebody just wanted to buy a piece of land, and they thought, hey, this is a great location and it's got road frontage and all that, only to find out that, they got screwed over by the state, right? So, fortunately, I have a background in contracts. That's what I did in the military. That's what I do as a civilian. So I went back to my contract and I looked at all the provisions and everything. And I realized that they had screwed something up when they were identifying, specific restrictions in that contract. So I went back to them and I was like, hey, this is what it says, and this is what you didn't properly identify it. And so they ended up, long story short, they ended up buying the property back for me and giving me everything back and deeding it back to them. But I found out recently that they sold it to somebody else.
Oh man.
Yeah.
So that
So never, trust but verify, I guess, is the lesson there. It doesn't matter who you're buying it from. I had, you know, I should have done maybe a little bit more research in that. But that was like maybe one situation where I was like, I had to go tell my wife, like, yeah, we spent some money and I don't know, we might be stuck with it.
so what was the state's idea, or whenever they sell you this land but you can't build anything on it, what do they expect you to do? Just sell it off to somebody else?
So I think ideally what would happen is there was a house next to it. So theoretically, the highest and best use would be for that homeowner to buy the parcel, and they just have extra land or whatever. But I don't know. I mean, honestly, I didn't dig too much farther into it. I'm sure that there are other properties that they sell that don't fall into that level of restrictiveness. But I just working for the government and, working in contracting specifically, I mean, I just can't imagine a situation where, a government entity has that level of knowledge and they don't disclose it.
Yeah.
I mean, it was kind of disheartening almost a little bit, because you're like, wow, I mean, they're doing that to people that live in, their own state that pay taxes. So I don't know. Yeah, it was
Did
just a lesson.
did you get a refund with interest upon that, or just the refund itself?
No, they bought the property back. I got all the auction. It was through a local auction house, and they gave me the auction cost fees back too. But I mean, it was a little bit of a process, but it was also a lesson, and if it hadn't happened that way, it just would have been a situation where I would have paid for an education.
Hmm.
So,
And I know, is there any other real estate that you've dabbled into? I know you said you've done land, you've done long term. What else have you done in that
um,
space?
yeah, so I've done long-term buy and holds. At one time, I had like 6 Airbnbs that I owned. I've done a design build on a home that we built in North Carolina. Built a duplex with a builder. Bought land, bought a mobile home park on a billboard. Um, Vacant land, acreage. Yeah, I mean, I've done a lot in the residential space. Owned some multifamily, some smaller multifamilies. Don't really have much experience in the commercial space, but
Hmm.
um, I don't know. We'll see in the future if that's an opportunity that comes up. But I really like land. I like infill lots. I like buying larger acreage tracts. I think there's a lot of opportunity there if you understand kind of the area, the zoning, the restrictions, the opportunities for development. Um, so yeah, that's more or less what I'm focusing on in addition to just normal long-term buy and hold
Okay. And
rental properties.
so you're the first person that we talked to that actually starts building, and that's an investor that builds. Uh, so what's the perspective of, is it profitable to build a duplex or whatever on a lot? Or is it better to just fix a property up?
So certainly from a cost perspective, it's a lot cheaper to buy something that's existing. And I'll say that when I did the two house builds, that was back in 2015, 16, and then 2017. So it was kind of during a time when, before, the market started to take off, obviously before COVID. And it was a time when builders were a little bit more hungry because the market was, a lot more stagnant. So today, if you went and tried to get a builder to do a one-off, build like that, they probably would tell you no. Unless it was like a high-end custom home where, you know, that's all that builder did. But in my situation, what I did was when I built our house, I actually built the main house on the first floor. The second floor had a separate entrance from the side that was a basically a one-bedroom apartment upstairs that we used as a short-term rental. And then there was also a 3-car detached garage that had a second story that was a second rental. So basically we had our main house and we had 2 Airbnbs on that property that we built. And then the duplex was uh, also on that same land that we owned at Cameron. And it was a 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom on each side. And that was also an Airbnb for a number of years. And so ultimately when we moved out of North Carolina, we sold that main house, but we kept all the surrounding land in the duplex. And so, to answer your question, it's always going to be cheap. Well, I shouldn't say always. Most of the time, especially in the market that I'm in, it's going to be a lot less expensive to fix something up. But you also have to think about the fact that okay, you fix up a 1960s home. I mean, unless you tear it down to the studs and rebuild it, there are always going to be elements of that home that old. Versus building something new. There's a lot less capex and repairs and updates that you're going to have to budget for over probably the first 10 or so years. So I mean it's a trade-off. I wouldn't say that one is better than the other. I would just say it's different approaches, and different things work for different people. And in this market with the cost of building, if I were to do it again now, I would probably be very selective in the area that I built in and what I was building, and I would definitely have a couple different exit strategies.
Nice. Okay. And when someone is getting into building properties, is it like, do you need a certain amount of experience to do that? Or like, for example, do you need a certain amount of money to get into this play? Or is it uh at that point where you done it, you were like, okay, I'm trying to get more properties, I'm trying to get more units in one property, such as the duplex having 2 Airbnbs on there. Uh is that your uh I guess your plan to do all that?
Yeah, so in North Carolina, I think if you're building a home that you plan to live on, there are some I mean, I'm not an expert, so don't take this as gospel, but my understanding is that you can GC a property, that you're building if you plan to live in it on your own in North Carolina. But if the intent is to rent it out, you need to use a general contractor. I am not a general contractor. So both of those builds were managed by general contractors. And I think, when you say, does it require experience? I think it requires experience in the sense that you need to have an understanding of, who you're hiring to do that job. Do they have um, the resources, the time, the experience to pull off whatever project that you're trying to do? Are they committed to the project? And so in that respect, it's much more of a, question about, making sure that you're finding and hiring the right person for that job. And then also identifying very, very specifically what you expect up front and how much it's going to cost. Because inevitably, when you start to do new construction and new builds, nothing ever goes exactly as planned. So to the greatest extent possible, you need to have everything identified up front, down to the almost down to the minutia. Because most of the time, if you start changing things along the way, um, if it is feasible, it's going to cost additional money. So yeah, in my instance, luckily, when we built our primary residence, that at that time, the builder was willing to, I own the land already, so the builder was willing to basically front all the costs for the build. I had to section out a 1 acre parcel. I had to deed that acreage over to him. He built the entire house, using his line of credit. And then at the end, I bought that back from him using a VA loan. So I know there's a lot of people that are, interested in utilizing a VA loan for, ground up construction. I know there are certain VA loan products that do allow for that. You know, I've never really run into a broker that's familiar with that program, but another way to do it is to find a builder that's willing to carry the cost of construction up front. I would say in this market, that'd probably be really challenging because most builders don't want to take on that level of risk. Um, but on the duplex, what I did was I did basically like a version of a BRRRR where I had a property that I had owned for a while and had appreciated. So I did a cash out refinance on that property and used the funds to build the duplex. And I managed that, the builder draws throughout the, construction process.
Nice. And you said you had 6 Airbnbs. You still have those?
No, so I've transitioned all my Airbnbs into long-term rentals. I got into Airbnb probably in 2000 and yeah, when we built the house in 2016, and I was in it for about maybe 4 years or 4.5 years, and then I kind of saw the writing on the wall. Well, I saw the writing on the wall that it was getting very saturated, but then also, I kind of started to realize that my time is even if I'm making, more money at the end of the day by running it as a short-term rental versus a long-term rental, it just wasn't worth it from an overall time and effort perspective. So I transitioned everything back into long-term rentals, and I would probably be hesitant to get into anything, short-term in the future at this point.
Okay. Have you ever tried midterm renting with nurses?
Yeah, we were doing midterm renting back in 2016. I mean, we were renting to nurses, we were renting to contractors. I mean, travel nurses were a big part of our business model. And so, yeah, we posted tons of travel nurses, and I mean, it was great. It was great to be able to give them a place to stay that was, comfortable, safe, convenient. But everything that we were doing, I would say we were a year and a half to 2.5 years, ahead of the pack, if you will.
Yeah.
And that's not because I knew that anything that anybody else didn't know. I was just trying to think outside the box. And when I was building my house, I wanted to find a way to, cover my mortgage. And I thought, okay, well, I'll just, I'll build a second story that I could rent out, and it just evolved from there.
I like that. And how are you managing? A lot of people probably wants to know, so how are you managing from Florida to manage all your properties in North Carolina, Fayetteville? How are you doing that specifically? Do you have people on board over there, like handymans that are ready by standby, or are you just are you collecting rents through Rent Ready? Like, how are you doing all this stuff?
Yeah, so with the exception of 2 storage buildings that I rent out to contractors in Fayetteville and the billboard, everything else is managed by my property manager, and that's a relationship that I've had from day one. Same property manager, she's had the same maintenance guy. So just over the years, we've grown together, and I think that is probably one of, if not the most important person to, to have on your team is a property manager where your vision and their vision are aligned, because at the end of the day they are, day to day managing, your asset. They're interacting with your tenants. They are, for all intents and purposes, they're the face of your rental properties. And so um, they've got to be good at vetting tenants. They have to be good with communication. They have to be good with record keeping. That, that it's not enough just to be good in one segment of property management. You have to find a property manager that's well rounded, and that um, is capable of, meeting your needs, and you're capable of meeting their needs, because it's really a two-way relationship.
Okay, okay. I like that since you're using a property manager, you have no basically you have all the time that you need now. So what do you do with that time since you get all that back?
Oh, I still have a W-2 job. I still work for the Army as a civilian.
Hmm.
So, you know, luckily, with them being long-term rentals and having a property manager, I mean, I still, I don't, um, spend a lot of time, in any given week or month, um, having to manage those. But of course, there's always, you have to reconcile things at the end of the month. Things come up, that you're not expecting, and that you have to work through. So I mean, there's always going to be a time element, that you have to be willing to dedicate to it. And I mean, the more properties that you get, the more time that's going to take, even if you have a property manager. So
Hmm. And for your contractors, have you ever had like a situation where you ran into like a bad contractor that kind of screwed you over at a point?
no, I've never run into like a bad faith contractor that, was just in it from the beginning to, take advantage of me. But what I have run into is contractors that I built relationships with that have gone, one of two ways. Either their business has outgrown my business, which it sucks, because, I use them repeatedly because they were good and they were reliable, and they, did a good job, communicated well. But at some point, if they're growing their business, either faster or in a different direction that you're growing your business, you naturally have to part ways, because um, that just at a certain point just doesn't become, tenable for one party or the other. And then I've had ones that, started out good and then just became unreliable, and in that instance, I don't have the time to, um, manage somebody at that level. Where are you coming to the job site? Are you doing what you're supposed to be doing? And kind of micromanaging, if you will. So because of that, a lot of what we do now are just, what I would call like light rehabs if we're buying, distressed properties. At one time, I was doing things that, were, entailed a lot more work. When I had good relationships with, with a few reliable contractors. But um, at this point, that's pretty challenging for me and where I'm at right now. So,
Mm.
it changes over time. I'm sure that when the economy slows down and people are more, hungry for work, it may be easier to take on some of those projects again.
Oh yeah. And do you have like an opinion like a that a lot of people disagree with that it's either with real estate or just investing in general?
Um, I mean, that's a hard one. I would say that, generally speaking, um, real estate's not for everybody. I think that a lot of times people, will listen to the podcast, they'll see the TV shows, and it glamorizes, the best parts of being a real estate investor. And what they don't see is the hard work. I mean, the time, the effort. It's not an environment where you get into it and you get rich quick. I mean, it's a snowball, and it's a snowball that accumulates mass, slowly over time. But at some point, it will, start to take on a life of its own. But you have to be committed for 5, 7, 10 years in order to, for that snowball to start, growing on its own without significant, input from you. So I think a lot of people, they look at real estate and they think, hey, that looks like a good way for me to grow my money, but their heart's not in it and their mind's not in it. And I think like going back to, when I said that the Army is not for everybody, real estate is not for everybody. Not everybody has the mindset or the desire or the love to um, be in it for the long haul. And it's just simply not something that, you know, you can get into and out of, very quickly. And if you do, it was a fluke, and that's great. I certainly wouldn't ever, condemn anybody who, got into it and got lucky and did a flip and made money. I mean, that's great. But to stay with it long term, I just think your heart has to be in it.
Hmm. Okay. I like that. And now we can move on to the ending questions here, Justin. So if you can go back in time and tell your younger self something, like let's say at age 18, what would it be?
Um, you know, I think I followed a path in life because, there were certain things that I saw when I was growing up as far as, the way my parents raised us, the way, their work ethic and kind of the things that they valued. And, that's how I saw life, and that's how kind of that was my vision of success. You go to college, you graduate, you get a job, you find something that's gonna, provide stability as far as your retirement and medical benefits. You grind it out for as many years as you have to, and you retire. Like that was what was ingrained in me as, the ultimate vision of success, as a kid growing up. And I don't think that's bad. I think that's for a lot of people that's great. But the reality is that today that those opportunities are few and far between. And I think my vision of that in the Army, when I was on active duty, really held me back from, maybe separating and transitioning to the reserves sooner. And I see now that I've made that decision, how life just kind of presents opportunities that you're never going to have unless you make those hard decisions that are uncomfortable.
Yeah, I like that. It so what would you tell your younger self in a way?
Just to, pursue what, don't be married to, something that might or might not happen in 20 years, because at the end of the day, like there are a lot of things that are going to happen in your life that you don't have any control over. So if you can't if you don't have control over every single step that happens between now and the time that you're supposed to achieve this end state, don't be handcuffed, to that, because it can be detrimental. Like you never know what opportunities, await outside of that, like defined path that you have in your head of what success looks like.
Hmm. Okay. And is there a question that you would like to ask your future self? Let's say 10 years down the line.
Um, yeah, that's a hard question, I guess. I think, over time as I've grown in specifically in real estate, and I've, you know, increased my portfolio, I don't have an end in state. I think naturally a lot of people are like, well, what defines success for you, and what, do you ultimately want to achieve? And for me, I do it because I like it. I do it because I enjoy it. It gives me fulfillment. And so I don't know ultimately, like, when am I going to get to that point where I feel like I've like succeeded, like I've accomplished what it is that I set out to accomplish. So I hope that at some point, in the near future, I can define that, and that, down the road in 10 years, I can look back and I can say, I achieved, what it is that I defined, for myself in this, aspect of life,
Hmm.
real estate investing.
Gotcha. Like that. And what do you think the secret sauce is? Doesn't have to be a secret, but what do you think that secret ingredient is into becoming very successful in any direction?
Um, I mean, I think it's for me, it's trying to remain as, humble, and understanding that, everything that, I've been able to achieve in life, like I have worked hard for, my wife has worked hard for, our family has worked hard for. Um, but that all came, not because I was handed anything in life, but I certainly didn't face a lot of the challenges that a lot of people face in life. And that set me up to, be where I am today. And so understanding that not everybody has those opportunities in life. And, I know a big thing for me, and I know, Carly, is,
Hmm.
we invest and I'm very particular about who I would, do business with. But, Carly is, um, the closest thing to godliness I think that I've ever met in my life. I mean, she is just a superhuman when it comes to, um, you know, meeting people, building relationships, like having empathy. I mean, I think I've just learned so much from, um, meeting and getting to know her, that we invest in real estate, and our goal at the end of the day is to provide, especially when we're buying like entry level, like we bought our mobile home park and our entry level, uh, multifamily properties, is to buy them at the right price, rehab them, and not, and be able to provide, safe and affordable housing for people without going in there and, jacking up their rents by 20, 30, 40%, because a lot of these people are on fixed incomes. They can't do that. Um, so I look at it as, a form of, philanthropy, which I think other people would look at that and they would, gawk or gasp or whatever. But the reality is that when you go in there, you buy a distressed property, you fix it up, you make it safe, you improve it, their rents are 20, 25, 30%, 40% under market rent. And your goal along the way was never to increase rent on them. I mean, that is something that you don't see a lot, in this industry. I mean, a lot of times people are buying mobile home parks and distressed properties, and they're increasing rents 100%. They're going
Mhm.
from $500 to $1,000. They're going a lot rent of $250 to $500, and you just don't know what that does to somebody and their ability to, to survive and thrive, because you know for a lot of people, life's hard, and just getting to tomorrow is challenging. So I think that's important. I think staying humble, even as you grow and you see the fruits of your labor and all the blessings that you get over time for the hard work. Just understanding that, look, that you need to be grateful.
I like that. I know I have to remind myself consistently, uh, like how far I've come in a way. Like, oh,
Yeah.
like 5 years ago, I wasn't like that. I was totally different human being now. And I it's like I'm from my parents are from Bangladesh, so whenever I travel with them, uh I remember the first time I traveled with them, I was with a I was with my dad, and we were going to the airport. I had my little McDonald's box, right? I was like 9 years old, had my McDonald's. I was like, oh man, I was saving it for later or whatever. And my dad, he took that from me. And I'm like, why would you take that from me? And then he gave it to one of the kids that were reaching out through the fence. I was like,
Yeah.
damn, that's I'm like, as a little kid, I'm like, we're the same age, but we're in two different positions in life. And I
Yeah.
looked at him, I'm like, wow. Uh, and then now, and I went there a second time, and like my mom, she would go out there and just give money or food or whatever that the people need. That's like a cultural thing there as well, where you just give back to the people.
Yeah.
Uh, and while I was there, I would just see like these kids. They would fight for just to go to school, or just
Yep.
to um you'll see them eating garbage or doing this or whatever. I'm like, it's so shocking how they're living their world over there, and then people in the United States, or just in general, like they don't see what they have. They don't see that they have running water. They don't see that they have air conditioning. They don't see that they have a bed that they live on. Um, a lot of those things that I am grateful for that I have, and my goal is to basically give back to them as much as I can and give them the opportunity, because I see it as, if I can't be the one that cures for cancer, right? There's someone out there. There's definitely a Bengali kid out there that's doing all this like doctor stuff or whatever to figure it out, but he doesn't have the funds, the education, or whatever uh, to go after it. So if I can
Yeah.
provide that for him or her to get there, then I played a part as my humanitarian mission to get that done. But that's like a little my 2 cents in there. And if do you have a quote that you live by or you go by?
I don't. I'm not like philosophical in that way. But I think what I've noticed, I over time, and especially as I've gotten older, and even through increased use of like emails and, non-personal communication, it's
Yeah.
just, you never know like what, again, like what other people are going through, and just being nice to people, like just not being a jerk, like not being condescending. I mean, it just, and you hope that you get that back, and you don't realize like, a lot of times, like how far that can go, just being, understanding, and, not coming at things from like a preconceived notion that the other person has an agenda, or like whatever the case may be. But yeah, just, just be easy to be around. Like be a person that other people like want to be around. It's just nothing's worse than being around somebody that's just constantly negative. Like it's bringing you down. So
Oh,
yeah, surround yourself with like-minded people.
two things, Justin, that I kind of want to know from you is one is how do you actually find the like partners that you partner up with, and two is like how do you basically become a for those that this generation now or like generations that are coming that we're more of a hermit, right? We have our computers, we're more isolated, we stay to ourselves, and they have a harder time communicating with others. And whenever they do get communicating with others, they don't see they have a they want a quick gratification in a way. It's like TikTok, right? If you're not interested, I'm just gonna walk away. Uh,
Yeah.
I want your recommendation on that and the partnership. So, some tips on those.
Yeah. So for me, there's only two people in the entire, 14, 15 years since I've been investing in real estate. There's only two people that I've done like a true partnership where I've gone into, a real estate transaction with. And that's just because over years of, communication and staying in touch and understanding that our visions are aligned, it was a natural progression towards, hey, like let's try and tackle this one project together. And then, getting through that and understanding that, okay, our goals really are aligned, like our visions are aligned, we understand each other, we um are in the same place and don't have disagreements about how, things should happen. And I think that's the way that it should be. I think if you rush into a relationship with somebody is in a business sense, and you haven't spent the time like building an understanding of who that other person is, it might work out, but chances are it might not. And I think that, if you're going to get into a long-term arrangement with somebody, especially that involves money and property and all that, like you really need to know who that person is, and you really need to have a high level of trust that, um, or as much as you can, that they have your best interest at heart, and you have their best interest at heart.
Hmm.
As far as the,
Better being a better human being.
yeah, yeah, but, but as far as like, culture today and being engrossed in, tablets and cell phones and everything else, I'm guilty of it too. I mean, I'm not any different than anybody else, but I have seen, especially, through some pivotal moments in my life, towards the end of my active duty career, I mean, I went through some incredibly challenging things personally and professionally, and I saw the power of of having relationships with people that cared about you, not only as like, hey, Captain T, or what I did at, as a profession, but me as a person. And um fostering those relationships, building those relationships, working through adversity, when most people would just expect that, faced with those circumstances, you would just quit or give up, persevering through and still continuing to, try as hard as I could. And it, recently, I mean, it came full circle because I had separated from active duty. I'd gone into the reserves. I took a job with the local county, working in procurement also. Um, but the people I worked with on the civilian side, they found out that I'd gotten out of active duty, and they were like, "Hey, like we want you to come back. We want you to come back and work for us." And they're in Maryland, right? So I was like, "Yeah, but I mean, I'm in Florida. I'm not moving from Florida. I mean, this is a retirement spot for us." And they're like, "Well, what if we can work it so that we can get a position recoded to fully remote, and you can work from home?" And like this is like a government, agency. And I'm like, well, I mean, that'd be fantastic if you could do that. Those guys spent collectively, probably three or four people months trying to get this position recoded. And they finally did, and they hired me. And I look back on it, and it was all because of the fact that, yeah, I worked hard, but it was because they saw me for the person that I was. They saw me for what I brought to the team. And had I not fostered those relationships, and at the time, I don't even know if I was doing it. I wasn't doing it intentionally. I mean, I didn't know that like all things were going to play out, 4 years later. But had I not taken the time to foster those relationships and build those relationships, I never would have had this opportunities today. Like I wouldn't be in this position. And I mean, I wouldn't be in a terrible position, but I'm in a much better position today because of that.
Yeah, definitely. I like that. And a lot of people wants to know, say, where do you think, as an expert yourself, Justin? I declare you as an expert.
I don't know about that, but yeah.
Where do you see the market heading to in the next couple of years, or this year or next year?
I mean, it's going to be challenging. I think, it's really market dependent. It's also, even within each market, I mean, there's obviously different segments of the market. I mean, you have entry level homes, you have mid level homes, you have, luxury homes. Um, and I think, there's always going to be the areas and the, segments of the United States that are going to be popular. I mean, like, your Southern Californias, your San Franciscos, your, um, parts of Texas, parts of Colorado, parts of Florida. But and generally speaking, in the market that I operate in, and I think probably in a lot of markets, your entry level homes, in my opinion, your 3 bedroom, 1 bathroom ranch, 1.5 bathroom ranch home, like that's what we see a lot in the Fayetteville market as what I would call entry level home. Those are going to continue to be, very, very popular and very in high demand because you simply can't build that house today for what it can be bought for. So builders aren't building them, right? So
Mhm.
there, instantly you have a restriction of supply. So I think the entry level market is going to continue to be very, very you know, hot, if you will, for the foreseeable future. But I think that interest rates, if they don't come down or if they stay elevated, I mean, it is going to impact the upper middle to luxury market. But yeah, at the end of the day, like I don't want to understate it, because it does affect a lot of people. But if you're talking about the difference between a 5% and a 7% interest rate on a $125,000 house, that's a lot different than the difference in 5 to 7% on a $600,000 house.
Mhm.
So a person that might have been able to buy in a B+ neighborhood when rates were at 3%, maybe they moved down to a B- neighborhood and they can still afford it at 6.5 or 7%.
Yeah.
So it's very market dependent. I think it's going to be an interesting time, though. I would certainly would be ready, if you're an investor, and know your market and know what you're looking for, because very well maybe some good opportunities.
Yeah. Do you invest in anything else, or just real estate? Do you like do stocks or anything of that sort?
Just on the government side, I think it's good to invest in the TSP personally.
Hmm.
And then yeah, just 401k, but not, I mean, not heavily. I would say a disproportionate amount of our money goes towards real estate, but generally speaking, it's probably more advisable to have a more healthy mix of investment types.
Nice. And second to last question here is, like, let's say you're uh years down the line, your kids look back on this. What would you like to tell your kids?
Um, you know, I, I would love for my kids to be, to share, the interest that I have in real estate, but I understand that, that may not be what happens. Ultimately, I hope that they just understand that, we worked hard early in our careers and early in life, when we were just starting out, to be able to get to where we got. And I just hope that they appreciate that, they got to grow up in a great neighborhood with great schools and a safe environment, and they don't take it for granted, because I think um, that would be sad, because I always had the opportunity to grow up in a safe place in a good neighborhood, but being in the military, just like you said, I've been to the places, I've seen poverty at a level that people in America probably could never imagine. And it's sad. It's sad when you see a kid that had no other choice. They have no idea. That's just life to them. So I just want my kids to be grateful. I want my kids to understand that this it wasn't it wasn't just happenstance that they ended up being able to grow up where they grew up and enjoy what they were able to enjoy.
Mhm. I like that. And finally, how can people reach out to you?
Um, I'm Probably best, if they want to, I'm on, I'm on Bigger Pockets if they want to find me on Bigger Pockets. I don't really use it that much, but I'd be happy after the show to share my contact information with you, and if you want to share it with your group or people that reach out to you. I don't have I don't maintain any websites or platforms or anything like that. It's not really my it's not really something that I focus on, to be honest with you.
No, you're
But
all good.
I'm happy to. I'm certainly happy to talk to anybody or help anybody out if I can. It's just not something that I have, a platform for.
Is there any value that you want them to bring along whenever they're communicating with you?
Um, no, I mean, if somebody that wants help, like I'm happy to help. I will, in full, honesty and transparency, I will say that, I've had, you know, a number of conversations with people that have, asked me my opinion based on, my experience, and you know, you have to want to take action. Like it's one thing to say, hey, I'm gonna go gather all this information. But if you don't take action, if you're not like really willing and able to take that step, um, I think you need to get to that point first before you start, reaching out to people that really can help, because it's a good thing to reach out to people. It's a good thing to, try and get as much information as you can. But if you do that before you're ready, it's waste your time. It wastes other people's time because you were never really ready to take that step,
Mm-hmm. Okay. And again, Justin, thanks for coming on to the podcast. You're amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.